Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I currently live a single life, although there was a time when I was married to a man named Dennis. Unfortunately, Dennis, along with his parents, Ethan and Ashley, made my life very difficult, even though both Dennis and I had successful careers and made good money. His parents saw me as someone who was just taking advantage of their son. This misconception was fueled by Dennis himself. He often bragged about how lucky I was to be married to a gorgeous woman that he thought I could never have achieved on my own. Because of this, his parents perceived me as a precious metal seeker. Dennis's tendency to imagine me financially dependent on him led to his parents insisting on a prenuptial agreement before our marriage. I wasn't opposed to a prenup in principle, but I was hurt by the lack of discussion between Dennis and me. He perpetuated the idea that I earned significantly less than him, which further reinforced his parents' wrong opinion of me. To avoid embarrassing him, I went along with this lie, even though it drew undeserved criticism and scorn from his family. My tolerance for this farce stemmed from my love for Dennis, even though it was obvious that he did not reciprocate that love and did not respect me as he should have. He took advantage of my income, especially after he lost his job, and allowed his parents to believe that I was the one dependent on him. I was exhausted from supporting both of us, and he was unwilling to look for a new job. The final straw was when I decided to buy a house. Through inherited money and my savings, I found and fell in love with the perfect place. I bought it in my name, which Dennis opposed. This decision was a turning point for me, forcing me to reevaluate our relationship and ultimately embrace my independence. But I had to remind him that he had made no financial contribution to the purchase of the house. Despite this, he continued to pester me about the situation. The thing that really pushed me to the limit happened during a family dinner. We were enjoying the evening until his parents brought up the topic of our new home. They expressed their curiosity about the house and suggested that Dennis should have been a major contributor, given their low estimate of my income. Yes, we've settled into the new house just last week. It's already furnished, so we moved in quite easily. I tried to keep the conversation neutral, hoping this would be an opportunity for Dennis to correct his parents' misunderstanding and acknowledge my financial contribution. The conversation took a turn when his parents directly questioned the ownership and financing of the house, implying doubt that I could afford such a property on my own. At this moment, I silently hoped Dennis would seize the chance to set the record straight. Instead, he shocked me by claiming he had paid for the entire house himself, thanks to his supposed financial success. His parents' reactions were as expected, full of pride and joy for their son's achievement. They showered him with praise, completely overlooking my role and presence. I tried to catch Dennis's eye, hoping for some acknowledgement, but he deliberately avoided my gaze. The injustice of the situation and the ease with which Dennis dismissed my contributions infuriated me. However, I managed to keep my composure in front of his parents, not wanting to cause a scene. As soon as we left their company, I couldn't hold back any longer. "What was that, Dennis? Why on earth would you tell your parents you bought the house all by yourself?" I confronted him, unable to comprehend why he would fabricate such a story and erase my significant contribution. Dennis tried to justify his actions by saying he lied to make his parents happy and to hide the fact that he had lost his job. "You could have just said we both contributed to buying the house," I argued, feeling utterly diminished and betrayed by his claim of sole ownership. It was a direct hit to my dignity. Dennis's response was dismissive, suggesting that what was done could not be undone, and he refused to correct the misconception with his parents. He seemed more concerned about avoiding personal embarrassment than addressing the injustice done to me. It became clear that Dennis prioritized his pride over our relationship and my feelings. This realization hit hard. The man I married had become someone willing to live off my efforts without contributing or respecting our partnership. His reluctance to find work and his insistence on being added to the house title only added to my sense of being used. Despite my growing frustration and disappointment, I remained uncertain about how to proceed. That indecision lingered until an incident the following day brought everything to a head. Hearing the doorbell and commotion, I asked Dennis to answer the door, only to find his parents on our doorstep, luggage in hand, ready to move in. They were under the impression, courtesy of Dennis, that they were invited to live in our new house indefinitely. Dennis welcomed them with open arms, playing the role of the generous son who had supposedly bought this large house and could now host his parents. Their praises and his acceptance of them left me speechless, my mind racing with disbelief and indignation. Never had I agreed to this arrangement, and the audacity of the situation made it clear that Dennis's deceit had crossed a line. At that moment, despite not wanting to cause a scene in front of his family, I knew there was no way I could allow this situation to continue. Dennis's parents living in my house based on a lie was entirely unacceptable. The thought had gone too far, and decisive action was needed to reclaim my space and my dignity. I was navigating a delicate situation, trying to handle the unexpected turn of events with as much grace as possible. Meanwhile, Dennis's parents were already dreaming big, talking excitedly about living in such a spacious house. Their comments about being cramped in their previous home and praising Dennis for securing such a luxurious living space only added to the tension. The mention of 5 bedrooms and their eagerness to claim the largest one for themselves felt like salt being rubbed into my wounds. "Let's hold off on choosing rooms for a moment. I need to speak with Dennis privately," I suggested, hoping to manage the situation discreetly. However, Dennis, clearly nervous and avoiding my gaze, sensed the seriousness of the confrontation that was about to unfold. His attempt to deflect by suggesting we discuss everything in front of his parents only amplified the discomfort. "If you're okay with it, Dennis, we can talk here," I agreed, my patience wearing thin. I was straightforward in my response. "Dennis, your parents cannot stay here. It's not going to happen. You didn't even ask me before making such a decision. How could you think this is all right?" His mother's immediate defense of him, claiming the house is his to do as he pleases and insinuating that I had no say in the matter, was shocking. They even went as far as to threaten me, suggesting that I should be careful not to get kicked out. Their demands to see the largest room as if nothing I said mattered was the final straw. The situation had escalated beyond a simple misunderstanding to a clear disregard for my feelings and contributions. It was evident that Dennis's parents viewed me not as a partner in our shared life, but as an outsider in my own home. Their attitude and Dennis's willingness to let this happen highlighted a deep disrespect, not only for our relationship, but also for the basic principles of communication and mutual respect within a marriage. Refusing Ashley's demand with a firmness that took both her and Ethan by surprise, I couldn't help but wonder where my frustration should truly lie. On one hand, their sense of entitlement was astonishing. On the other, it was Dennis's deception that had sparked this entire ordeal. Without his lies and false invitations, we wouldn't be in this mess. Yet I couldn't entirely absolve Ashley and Ethan of blame. Their boldness in my own home, even threatening my place in it, was something I found difficult to overlook. Ashley and Ethan, clearly taken aback by my resistance, insisted that their stay was secured by a promise from Dennis for the biggest room, revealing they had terminated their rental agreement in anticipation of moving in. "You've made a significant error in judgment," I informed them, clarifying the impossibility of their staying, especially under the conditions they expected. Their outrage at my stance was palpable, asserting that my consent was irrelevant and that Dennis would resolve the matter in their favor. This was when I had to clarify the true ownership of the house. "You're mistaken, Ashley," I stated. "It seems Dennis hasn't informed you that the house is actually mine, not his. So the option of staying here, let alone claiming the largest room, is not available to you." Their disbelief at my assertion only escalated the situation, with them accusing me of lying about the house's ownership. I suggested they seek confirmation from Dennis himself, hoping he would finally be compelled to tell the truth. Faced with their expectations, Dennis was put on the spot to support their view and confirm his false claims of ownership. Both Ethan and Ashley waited eagerly for him to reaffirm their beliefs, placing him in a position where he had to choose between continuing his facade or confronting the truth head-on. Understanding that the root of the confusion lay with Dennis's deceit, I couldn't fully fault his parents for their assumptions. Their silence and Dennis's evasion of eye contact gradually hinted at the truth finally sinking in, though they were still struggling to reconcile this with their preconceived notions of me. For so long, they had been convinced of my supposed financial dependence and Dennis's success, making the reality hard to swallow. When confronted with their demands for an explanation, Dennis remained silent, his avoidance a silent admission of the truth I was stating. Offering to present the property documents as proof of my ownership, I challenged their disbelief head-on. Their insistence that Dennis, with his previously high income, was the logical owner contrasted sharply with the reality of his job loss and dependence on my income. I corrected them, emphasizing that not only had Dennis lost his job a year ago, but I also had a successful career, contrary to their judgment based on superficial assessments. The revelation visibly shocked Ethan and Ashley, rendering them speechless. Meanwhile, Dennis's continued silence, his gaze fixed on the floor, avoiding any confrontation, only added to the tension. Faced with persistent silence from Dennis, I decided it was time to end the uncomfortable situation. I informed Ethan and Ashley that it was time for them to leave, having tolerated enough disruption for one day. However, Dennis finally spoke up, protesting their eviction based on the hardship it would cause them, having left their previous living arrangement with the expectation of staying with us. His plea put me in a difficult position, highlighting the complexity of the situation. It wasn't just about setting boundaries, but also considering the immediate implications of these revelations on his parents, who were now caught in the fallout of Dennis's web of lies. "I can, and indeed I will, Dennis," I affirmed, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You made these decisions without my input, essentially offering them a place in my house as if it were yours to give." Dennis, feeling entitled by his role as my husband, argued that his word should allow his parents to stay, suggesting that my hands were tied in this matter. Ashley chimed in, claiming shared ownership of everything I owned through Dennis, as if marriage erased individual rights to property. However, I stood my ground. "No, Ashley," I stated firmly. "I can indeed ask you to leave. And Dennis, you'll be leaving with them, since we are still legally tied. I'll prepare an eviction notice for you, and I won't stop there. I'll be seeing my lawyer to discuss our divorce." Dennis's reaction to the mention of divorce was immediate and visceral, marked by panic and anger, as if the possibility had never crossed his mind. He retorted, threatening to take half of the house and demand alimony, believing he could intimidate me into submission. "Really, Dennis? Have you forgotten the prenup you were so eager to have me sign?" I reminded him. "It explicitly states that neither of us can claim alimony and that our individual assets remain ours in the event of a divorce. You and your parents thought you were protecting your future by having me sign that document, never imagining the tables would turn." The reminder of the prenuptial agreement's conditions was a stark wake-up call for Dennis and his parents. They had been so confident in Dennis's perpetual success that the reality of their current predicament had not fully dawned on them until now. As the gravity of their miscalculations settled in, their confidence wavered, leading to a sudden shift in their stance. "Maybe we don't need to rush into a divorce," they suggested, their tone revealing the desperation of their changed circumstances. "Let's just sit down and figure this out. Maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone," Dennis proposed, believing in the possibility of reaching a mutual agreement. But I had reached my limit. "I'm not here to solve problems for your benefit," I stated firmly. "I won't be used for financial gain by you, Dennis, nor will I tolerate any more exploitation from your parents." After their mistreatment, Dennis tried to diminish the significance of their actions, suggesting I should overlook their past behavior as minor issues that happened long ago. But the recent threat of eviction from my own home made by him and his parents wasn't something I could just ignore. Their sudden shift to pleasantry couldn't erase the immediate tension as they started to plead for understanding, believing they could persuade me as they might have in the past. It was clear they had underestimated my resolve. The fact that they had canceled their lease, assuming they could simply move in with us, showed a blatant disregard for my autonomy. I was determined not to be walked over any longer. When it became apparent that Ethan and Ashley had no intention of leaving, I took decisive action and called the police to escort them out. Following their departure, Dennis's anger at their eviction was met with a reminder of his impending eviction from my home. Confronted with the reality of his situation, Dennis's demeanor quickly changed to one of apology and remorse. The rapid changes in their attitudes were unsettling, but I was relieved to know it would soon be over. From that moment on, I made it clear that Dennis was no longer welcome in my personal space, marking the end of a long-standing pattern of manipulation. Dennis was relegated to the guest room until his departure was finalized by an eviction notice, leaving him no alternative but to leave his parents. After depleting a significant portion of their savings on hotel expenses, they were compelled to seek a new rental property. Interestingly, they chose not to welcome Dennis into their new residence, leaving him to face the challenges of finding accommodation just as they had. This decision seemed to stem from their desire to hold Dennis accountable for his deceit and the predicament it caused them, leading to a noticeable rift in their relationship. They blamed each other for their current situation, resulting in his parents withdrawing their support for Dennis. His financial contribution was the only value they seemed to appreciate, leaving Dennis to temporarily rely on friends' generosity while searching for employment. In the meantime, I proceeded with the divorce from Dennis, convinced that continuing our marriage was out of the question. His actions had shown a lack of respect and a deeply ingrained selfishness, far removed from the person I once loved. Despite Dennis's efforts to reconcile, my decision was unwavering. I refused to be exploited further. The divorce was finalized relatively quickly given our childless status, and we were officially separated within 8 months. During this period, I focused on building my life and eventually began dating again, while Dennis still harbored hopes of rekindling our relationship. Such a possibility existed only in his fantasies.